It began with a sound the palace had never known before: silence. Not the polite hush that precedes a royal announcement or the reverent quiet of a ceremonial hall, but something far heavier. A silence so complete it carried weight. And in that silence, the world shifted. Kate Middleton's trembling voice broke through it, for words that sent shockwaves across Britain and beyond. "I'm gonna miss you." What could force a woman known for her grace, her poise, her unbreakable composure, to say something so raw, so human? What could make the future Queen of England, the rock beside the heir to the throne, speak like someone who had just seen her world collapse? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The palace has always been a fortress: polished marble floors, centuries-old portraits, and rules that outlast human emotion. But on this day, emotion flooded those corridors like never before. Staff walked with eyes lowered, journalists pressed against iron gates, and outside Kensington Palace, the air itself seemed to mourn. Something had happened to Prince William. Something serious. Something the monarchy tried to bury beneath official statements and calm smiles. But truth has a way of finding cracks, and through those cracks, the pain poured out. For weeks, royal watchers noticed the signs. William, once the picture of health, had begun to look different. The strong posture that symbolized stability for the British people was slightly slouched. The sparkle in his eyes, that mischievous charm that reminded so many of his late mother, Princess Diana, had dulled. Public appearances grew shorter, rarer. Engagements canceled at the last minute. At first, people blamed exhaustion, stress, the endless duties of modern royalty. But whispers began to swirl. And when Kate suddenly canceled her own events to stay by his side, the whispers became rumors, and the rumors turned into fear. Because this wasn't about politics, or scandal, or public image anymore. This was about love, about loss, about something deeply human happening behind palace gates that had never allowed the world inside before. Can you imagine that moment? The woman who once stood smiling in a white gown beside her prince, now standing by a hospital bed, his hand pale in hers, the scent of antiseptic replacing the perfume of royal banquets? It's a haunting image, and it's real. Let's rewind. The morning started normally, or so the palace wanted it to seem. A drizzle of rain fell over London, the kind that turns the city silver. Paparazzi lined the street, waiting for Kate and William to attend a private meeting at a nearby charity foundation. But by mid-morning, the tone shifted. Cars moved faster. Security tightened. One by one, journalists began receiving anonymous tips. Something's happened to the prince. Inside, chaos. A call from the medical wing. A sudden emergency lockdown. The palace press office issued a brief statement. The Prince of Wales is resting after a minor health matter. Minor. The word echoed like an insult to those who saw what truly happened. The man who will one day be king had collapsed. Kate was the first to reach him. Witnesses say her composure shattered in that instant. For years, she had been the image of calm, the unshakable duchess who smiled through storms. But that morning, her voice trembled as she shouted his name, her heels clattering against the cold marble floor. Guards rushed in. Doctors followed. Within minutes, William was carried to the private royal infirmary, unconscious but breathing. The world didn't know it yet, but that was the moment everything changed. Outside the palace, the press waited for updates that never came. Inside, time lost meaning. Every minute felt like an hour. Kate refused to leave his side. She sat in silence, whispering prayers only he could hear. When aides suggested she rest, she simply said, "Not until he opens his eyes." And then came the quiet that wrapped around the palace like a shroud. No laughter from the royal children. No chatter among the staff. Even the palace clocks seemed to tick more slowly, as if mourning the uncertainty in the air. But here's the question that burned through every loyal supporter's mind. What really happened to Prince William? The palace's carefully crafted image began to crumble. Leaks hinted at something deeper, something medical. Words like neurological fatigue, recurring fainting episodes, and degenerative condition floated in whispers, each one more terrifying than the last. And when Kate was seen leaving a London hospital late at night, her eyes red and swollen, the nation held its breath. Imagine, for a moment, what that must have felt like. A wife, a mother, and a future queen walking into a world where the person she loves most is slipping away. Not suddenly, but slowly, painfully. And yet, she stayed silent. For weeks, she said nothing. Not a word to the press. Not a statement to the people. She smiled for the cameras when required, but behind that smile was something no lens could capture: fear. But then, she broke. When Kate Middleton finally stood before the cameras, her voice quiet, her face pale, the world expected a calm reassurance. Maybe another palace message about temporary rest. Instead, she began to cry. Just a single tear at first, tracing the curve of her cheek. And then she said it, the line that would echo across every screen in the world: "I'm gonna miss you." The crowd fell silent. Even reporters, trained to chase stories, froze. What did she mean? Miss him where? Was she implying the worst? And just as quickly as she appeared, she was gone, ushered away by aides. No explanation. No press statement. Just those 4 haunting words. From that moment, the palace walls became a prison of speculation. Was it cancer? A brain condition? Something genetic? Theories exploded online. Doctors weighed in, royal experts speculated, and even political figures began quietly preparing for continuity contingencies. But those who knew William personally described a man who had been hiding pain for months. He had been pushing through it, smiling, shaking hands, laughing on camera, while privately battling something he couldn't control. And through it all, Kate never left him. Every canceled engagement, every unexplained absence, was a moment spent at his side, holding his hand through the darkest hours. Can you feel it? That kind of love, the kind that doesn't appear in fairy tales, but in hospital rooms and whispered goodnights. The kind that asks, "How much more time do we have?" instead of "What's next on the royal calendar?" The people adored them because they seemed real. William and Kate were the modern heartbeat of the monarchy, grounded, relatable, loving. But what happens when the very symbol of hope begins to fade? That's the question Britain is asking tonight. Behind closed doors, sources reveal that King Charles has been deeply shaken. He's a father first, a monarch second. Reports claim he canceled his own engagements to stay in constant contact with the medical team. Princess, and ever the stoic, was seen arriving quietly at the palace late one evening. No entourage, no photographers, just family. And still, the silence persists. Some say the palace fears another Diana moment, a nation plunged into collective grief. Others believe they're waiting until William stabilizes before going public. But every hour of silence fuels more speculation, more fear, more heartbreak. One royal aide was overheard saying, "The Queen would have handled this differently." But the truth is, even the late Queen never faced something like this: the possible loss of her grandson, the man destined to carry the crown into a new era. And in the middle of it all is Kate. The woman who once brought laughter and light into those ancient walls, now standing at the center of a storm she never asked for. Those closest to her describe sleepless nights, constant hospital visits, and a heartbreaking determination to stay strong for the children. George, Charlotte, and Louis are said to have been kept largely away from the hospital. Too young to understand, sources say. But children always sense what adults hide. Imagine George asking, "When will Daddy come home?" and Kate forcing a smile she doesn't feel, whispering, "Soon, sweetheart." How long can she keep that promise? What happens when the next update isn't good news? When resting comfortably becomes critical but stable? The monarchy was built to endure war, scandal, and politics, but it has never truly faced the slow unraveling of its human heart. And now, whispers are turning into murmurs, murmurs into dread. Royal insiders hint that William's condition may not improve, that what began as exhaustion has revealed something deeper, something irreversible. Kate's tearful words weren't scripted. They weren't rehearsed. They were real. And when she said, "I'm gonna miss you," she wasn't speaking as a duchess or a queen in waiting. She was speaking as a wife watching the man she loves slip beyond reach. But what happens next, what Kate does next, will redefine her legacy forever. Because in the face of tragedy, she's about to make a choice that could shake the monarchy's foundations to its core. And that choice? It's something no one saw coming. Because sometimes, in a palace built on tradition and silence, one woman's truth can echo louder than centuries of secrecy. And the truth Kate Middleton is about to reveal will change everything. It started as a day like any other. A clear morning sky over London, the hum of royal engines rolling through the palace gates, photographers ready for the perfect shot of Britain's golden couple. Nobody knew that within hours, that same calm would be shattered. The palace's official schedule read simple enough. The Prince and Princess of Wales to attend a private meeting with the Earthshot Foundation team at Windsor. Routine. Predictable. Nothing extraordinary. But behind that polished facade of royal planning was a man running on fumes. William had been hiding it for weeks. The fatigue, the dizzy spells, the moments when the world seemed to spin for no reason. He'd brush them off with a grin. Just tired, he'd say, adjusting his tie, pretending the dizziness was nothing more than lack of sleep. But deep down, he knew something was wrong. And that morning, his body finally decided it had had enough. The first sign came just after 9. Staff at Windsor Castle noticed William pausing longer than usual before stepping out of his car. He leaned against the door, his eyes distant, his breathing shallow. Kate, ever watchful, reached for his arm. "You all right, love?" she whispered. He smiled weakly, that same reassuring grin he'd used to calm her nerves 1,000 times. But this time, it didn't reach his eyes. They walked inside. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. And then, as they entered the conference room, everything went still. A dull thud echoed, a sound so heavy it silenced the room. Papers scattered. Kate gasped. William was on the floor. At first, there was disbelief. Royals don't fall. They don't faint. They endure. But within seconds, Kate dropped to her knees, her voice breaking. "William, William, can you hear me?" Her cry sliced through the sterile air like glass. Staff froze, unsure whether to rush forward or give space. An aide finally moved, calling for emergency assistance through a trembling radio. Time blurred. Medical staff flooded the room. Kate clung to William's hand, whispering his name over and over as if repetition alone could bring him back. His pulse was faint, his face drained of color. The strong, athletic Prince of Wales, the man who'd flown rescue helicopters and braved storms, lay motionless on the carpeted floor of a boardroom. No one dared to breathe. Outside, journalists continued their routine chatter, unaware that history was unfolding just meters away. Inside, Kate's entire world was collapsing. When the paramedics finally stabilized him, the palace immediately went into lockdown. Phones confiscated, windows sealed, statements drafted. Medical incident, that was the phrase chosen. Cold, clinical, devoid of emotion. But behind those words was chaos. Kate rode in the ambulance with him, her hand pressed to his chest as the vehicle sped through the streets of Windsor. The flashing lights reflected in her tear-filled eyes, turning her reflection into something ghostly. She whispered, "Stay with me, please stay with me." At the hospital, security was tightened to the extreme. Entire wings cleared, curtains drawn, staff sworn to secrecy under royal confidentiality orders. Only a handful of people were allowed inside. By midday, rumors had already begun. Twitter buzzed with words like collapse, stroke, heart attack. Hashtags trended. The palace responded with the usual vague reassurance. The Prince of Wales is resting after a minor health matter. Minor. The word burned through Kate's mind. How could anyone call this minor? Inside his private hospital suite, machines beeped softly, the cruel rhythm of uncertainty. Kate sat beside him, fingers brushing through his hair as she tried to steady her breathing. Doctors came and went, their expressions grave. One of them finally turned to her and said the words no wife ever wants to hear. "There's something unusual in his test results. We'll need to run further scans." Unusual. Another vague word that meant everything and nothing. Hours passed. Night fell. The outside world saw nothing. No photos, no updates, no confirmations. But inside, Kate watched the man she loved tremble in pain every time consciousness flickered back. And then, as if fate wanted to twist the knife, his first words were not of comfort or clarity. They were fragmented, confused, slurred. "Where am I?" Kate froze. His voice sounded distant, like someone speaking through fog. "You're safe," she whispered, forcing a smile. "You're in the hospital. You fainted, that's all. You're okay." But he wasn't okay. The doctors' faces said it all. The next morning, word reached King Charles. He canceled a meeting at Balmoral, and immediately called the hospital. His voice, normally firm and measured, cracked for a moment when he spoke to Kate. "Tell me everything," he said quietly. She told him what little she could. And then the questions began. Was this exhaustion? Stress? A neurological issue? Something genetic? The possibilities tore through their minds like lightning. Meanwhile, the palace was under siege. Journalists camped outside the hospital gates. Helicopters hovered. Reporters begged for a statement. Some said William was already in a coma. Others claimed he'd suffered a cardiac arrest. The truth was simpler but more terrifying. The doctors didn't know yet. For Kate, time had lost meaning. She sat there, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest, the faint hum of monitors, the low murmur of medical staff. Every sound became a reminder that he was still here, and that at any second, that could change. When night fell again, the nurses dimmed the lights. She leaned close, pressing her forehead against his. "Please, don't leave me," she whispered. And that's when it happened. A small movement. His fingers twitched. His eyes fluttered open for a second, unfocused but alive. She gasped, tears spilling freely now. "Hey," she breathed, voice trembling. "You're back." But he didn't speak. Just a faint smile, weak, fleeting, almost apologetic. And then he drifted back into sleep. The following morning, palace staff held an emergency meeting. Advisors urged restraint. "We can't cause panic," one said. "This must be handled delicately." Another countered, "The people will find out anyway. Transparency will protect us." But in the end, tradition won. They chose silence. Kate disagreed. She wanted the truth out, at least enough to calm speculation. But her words were dismissed. "It's best for the family's privacy," they told her. Privacy. Another lie to cover fear. Outside, the world noticed her absence. Engagements canceled. Public appearances postponed. When she was finally seen again, her eyes told a story no press release could hide. She was thinner, paler, and her smile looked forced. People began connecting dots. Social media exploded. Why is the palace hiding the truth? What's wrong with William? Is the monarchy collapsing? In the shadows of Buckingham Palace, aides whispered of contingency plans. Some even discussed the unimaginable. What if the heir cannot fulfill his duties? Who steps next in line? But inside that hospital room, none of that mattered. Kate wasn't thinking about crowns or titles. She was thinking about the man who used to make her laugh until her sides hurt. The man who danced awkwardly in the kitchen at midnight. The father who read bedtime stories with silly voices just to make the kids giggle. And now he lay there, his heartbeat steady but fragile. She took out her phone, scrolling through old photos. William smiling at George's first football match. William holding Louis upside down. William stealing a kiss behind palace curtains. Every image felt like a knife twisting in her chest. How could this be happening? How could someone so strong, so full of life, look so breakable? A nurse walked in, softly placing a hand on her shoulder. "He's stable for now," she said kindly. "Try to rest." But Kate couldn't. She didn't dare close her eyes. Every blink felt like a risk. What if she opened them and he was gone? At dawn, she stepped out to breathe. The hospital courtyard was empty, the early light painting the world in cold blues and grays. She wrapped her arms around herself, staring at the horizon. Somewhere, far off, church bells began to ring, slow and somber, though the world didn't yet know why. Her phone buzzed. A message from a trusted aide. They're drafting the official statement. Be prepared. Prepared for what? That's when she knew. They were getting ready for the worst. Kate returned to the room and took his hand again. She whispered the words that would later break the nation's heart. "If you can hear me, I'm not ready to lose you. The children need you. I need you." He didn't respond, but a single tear rolled down her cheek and landed on his hand. And maybe, just maybe, he felt it, because his fingers moved ever so slightly, as though squeezing hers back. Doctors entered, checking vitals, exchanging glances that said more than their words ever could. They spoke quietly, clinically. "We found irregular activity in his neurological scans," one murmured. "It's too early to conclude, but we're investigating a possible degenerative factor." Kate's heart stopped. Degenerative. The word lingered like poison. She turned away, staring at the closed curtains. Behind them, outside, the world was waiting. Inside, her world was collapsing. And as she sat there, listening to the soft rhythm of his breathing, one terrifying thought began to take shape in her mind. What if this wasn't temporary? What if this was the beginning of the end? Because sometimes tragedy doesn't arrive in explosions or headlines. Sometimes it begins quietly, with a single fall, a single faint, a single whisper of uncertainty that grows into something unstoppable. And deep within the palace, where secrets are currency and silence is policy, they all knew it. This was no ordinary health scare. This was the moment everything changed. But what came next would change not only the royal family, but the entire nation. Because the next discovery, buried deep in the royal medical files, would unravel everything they thought they knew about the future King of England. And no one, not even Kate, was prepared for what those files revealed. It's often said that silence speaks louder than words. But in the weeks that followed Prince William's collapse, the silence from Kensington Palace became deafening and terrifying. No press conferences, no photos, no cheerful family outings with George, Charlotte, and Louis. Nothing. Just the hollow echo of unanswered questions ricocheting across Britain. The public waited for reassurance, but the palace gave them a void. And in that void, fear began to grow. The official line remained unchanged. The Prince of Wales is resting and recovering from a minor health issue. But if this were truly minor, why had the royal family vanished from public life? Why had Kate cancelled every engagement? Why was the flag at Windsor flying at half-mast for 3 consecutive mornings before quietly being raised again? It didn't add up. And the British public, sharp, loyal, emotionally invested, began to sense that something was very wrong. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was unbearable. Corridors that once echoed with chatter and laughter now carried only whispers. Staff moved carefully, as if afraid to disturb the heavy air that hung over the royal residence. The clinking of teacups in the kitchen sounded like thunder in the silence. Kate barely slept. Every night, she'd slip out of the royal apartment, her heels tapping softly against marble floors, and drive to the private hospital where William lay. She sat by his bed until dawn, holding his hand, whispering old memories to fill the sterile room with warmth. Nurses came to know her by name. They admired her quiet strength, but behind her calm eyes, there was exhaustion, the kind that seeps into your bones. Royal aides tried to shield her from public pressure, but that was impossible. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from concerned friends, journalists, and palace officials demanding updates. She ignored most of them. Every word she didn't say became its own kind of statement, one that told the world she was protecting something fragile, something sacred. Meanwhile, the palace's communications team was losing control. Leaks were spreading like wildfire. One aide, who later resigned, described an emergency meeting where senior advisors debated how to handle the growing crisis. "We can't lie to the public forever," one said. Another snapped. "We don't owe them the truth about everything." But truth has a way of slipping through even the tightest locks. A journalist from the Daily Mail claimed to have received a private hospital log showing a high-profile patient undergoing a series of neurological tests. The entry was dated 2 days after William's collapse. Though the name was redacted, the timing matched perfectly. When the story broke, the palace called it grossly inaccurate. But the denial came too late. The world was already convinced something catastrophic was being hidden. Public speculation exploded. Was it a brain tumor? A degenerative disease? Had William inherited something from the Spencer bloodline? Social media platforms turned into forums of conspiracy and grief. Hashtags trended. Hashtag pray for William. Hashtag where is the prince? Hashtag Kate's silence. And through it all, Kate said nothing. One evening, paparazzi caught her leaving the hospital just past midnight. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable. But the photo that went viral wasn't of her. It was of her hand. Her wedding ring, once gleaming, seemed loose on her finger. Internet sleuths zoomed in, overanalyzing every detail, claiming it symbolized emotional detachment, grief, or rapid weight loss from stress. They were right about one thing. She was wasting away under the pressure. Meanwhile, the royal children began asking questions she couldn't answer. George asked, "When's Daddy coming home?" Charlotte wanted to draw a get-well-soon card and asked if they could take it to him. Kate told them, "Daddy's resting." But the truth sat like a stone in her throat. It was Princess and who finally broke through Kate's wall of quiet despair. One afternoon, She arrived unannounced. No photographers, no formalities. Just a sister-in-law, a woman who had seen her share of heartbreak. She found Kate sitting by the window of the private suite, staring out at nothing, and didn't speak right away. She simply poured 2 cups of tea and handed one to Kate. "You remind me of my mother," she said softly. "She used to carry the weight of the world without showing a crack. But I learned something watching her. Even steel bends. Catherine, you can't carry this alone." Kate didn't reply. She didn't have to. The tears spilling silently down her face were answer enough. The next day, and arranged for Kate to have a few hours of rest while she sat by William's side. When Kate returned, she found and reading aloud from a small book of poetry, something William had loved as a boy. It was a rare, fragile moment of comfort in weeks of torment. But just when things seemed to steady, another storm hit. A staff member from the hospital leaked that William had undergone further testing after irregular results were found in his neurological scans. The leak spread within hours, landing on every major news outlet by morning. Cameras swarmed the hospital gates. Helicopters hovered overhead. The palace was forced to respond, and this time, their statement only deepened the mystery. The Prince of Wales continues to recover and appreciates the public's concern. He remains in private care under observation. Further details will not be disclosed. Translation: they had no control over the narrative anymore. That night, Kate received a phone call that shattered her remaining composure. It came from one of William's lead physicians. His tone was grave. "We're seeing signs of neurological regression," he said carefully. "It could be temporary or not. We need more time to understand what we're dealing with." Kate's knees gave out. She sat on the floor, clutching the phone to her chest as tears finally broke through. That was the night she stopped pretending. She called her parents, her brother, her closest friend. "It's bad," she whispered. "It's worse than anyone knows." For the first time, she considered what the future might look like without William, and the thought was unbearable. The palace's silence, which once served as protection, now felt like a curse. Every word unspoken grew into a shadow that hung over the nation. Journalists started comparing the situation to Princess Diana's final days. The secrecy, the misinformation, the emotional walls. The monarchy, once again, was being accused of prioritizing image over humanity. In one powerful editorial, a columnist wrote, "If the royal family continues to hide the truth, they risk losing what little trust the people still have. Transparency is no longer optional. It's survival." That piece went viral overnight. And the next morning, for the first time, a senior palace official visited Kate privately to discuss a communication strategy. She refused. "He's not a story," she said coldly. "He's my husband." But deep down, she knew that silence couldn't last forever. The world was watching, and the longer they waited, the more explosive the eventual truth would become. Meanwhile, inside the hospital, William's condition fluctuated. Some days, he'd open his eyes and whisper Kate's name. Other days, he was completely unresponsive. Doctors spoke in cautious tones, always using words like monitoring, progressing, resting. But none of it sounded hopeful. By the 4th week, even the staff had stopped believing the official line. One nurse was overheard whispering to another, "They're not telling us everything. This isn't exhaustion." And then, something happened that shattered what little trust remained. A hospital janitor, curious after weeks of secrecy, stumbled upon an unmarked medical folder left on a counter. Inside were printed test results with the royal insignia on the top corner. The name was smudged, but one phrase stood out: Stage 2 neurological degeneration. Observation recommended. He snapped a photo before security confiscated it. Within hours, that image was circulating online. The palace called it fabricated. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. That night, as Kate sat beside William's bed, she felt the ground beneath her start to crumble. She looked at him, pale, still, barely recognizable, and whispered, "They're not protecting us anymore. They're protecting themselves." For the first time, anger began to replace fear. The silent weeks had taken their toll, but they also gave her something she hadn't expected: clarity. She realized she couldn't rely on palace advisors, spin doctors, or centuries-old protocols. This wasn't about monarchy anymore. It was about family, about truth. And Kate Middleton was ready to fight for both. But she had no idea that the next thing she'd discover, a single, misplaced hospital document would reveal something the royal family had desperately tried to bury. And when she saw what was written inside, her heart stopped cold. Because that document didn't just describe an illness. It hinted at something much darker, something that could destroy the monarchy from within. And that's when the silence finally broke. You could drive past it 100 times and never know what it was. Nestled between rolling hills and ancient oak trees just outside Berkshire sat a discreet, ivy-covered estate that most maps didn't even mark. Locals called it Northfield House. The royal family had another name for it, the clinic. It was where they sent the unspeakable problems, the illnesses, the family secrets that couldn't survive public light. That's where they took Prince William. The public had been told he was recovering at a London facility under light supervision. But in truth, a private motorcade moved him under cover of night to this hidden medical compound guarded by unmarked security vans and men who carried no badges. Even some senior palace staff had no idea where he'd gone. Only a handful of people knew. King Charles, Queen Camilla, Princess Anne, and Kate herself. Kate didn't argue when they told her about the transfer. She simply asked one question: will he be safe there? And the lead physician had hesitated before answering. As safe as we can make him, Your Royal Highness. The drive took 2 hours. No sirens, no flashing lights, just the quiet hum of engines cutting through fog. Inside the car, Kate sat holding William's hand, her reflection flickering in the tinted window. The countryside blurred past, endless and ghostly. When they arrived, the gates creaked open like something out of a dream. The place looked less like a hospital and more like an old boarding school, red brick walls, arched windows, and manicured lawns. But inside, it was a fortress of silence. Thick walls, soundproof doors, sterile white corridors lined with technology that didn't exist in any public NHS facility. Kate followed the doctors as they wheeled William down a hallway that smelled faintly of antiseptic and roses. Nurses wore plain uniforms without insignia. Cameras were forbidden. Phones sealed in lockers. Every patient door was numbered, not named. It was here, behind door 27, that William disappeared from the public world. Days turned into weeks. The doctors gave their updates in phrases so carefully crafted they sounded like riddles. He's stable for now. There are signs of neurological fatigue. We're monitoring cerebral responses. But each time Kate pressed for clarity, they sidestepped. One night, unable to bear the uncertainty, she wandered the corridor until she found a light on at the nurse's station. A young attendant looked up nervously as Kate approached. "Please," Kate whispered. "No titles. I just need to know if he's in pain." The nurse hesitated, then nodded slowly. "He sleeps most of the time. Sometimes he murmurs names, yours, the children's. He doesn't seem to know he's here." Those words hollowed her out. Kate returned to his room, sat by the bed, and held his hand until dawn. His skin was cold, his breathing steady but shallow. Machines pulsed softly beside him, blinking in rhythm like distant stars. But something gnawed at her. The secrecy, the guarded language. Why bring him to a facility that technically didn't exist? The next day, while walking through the garden courtyard, she overheard 2 orderlies whispering near a fountain. One said, "Did you hear what they told the press? That he's in London? They'll never find this place." The other laughed quietly. "Of course not. That's the point." That night, curiosity overwhelmed fear. Kate waited until the hallway was empty, slipped into the staff wing, and found a small records room with cabinets labeled by number. Her pulse hammered. She opened the drawer marked 27. Inside were medical charts, neuroimaging reports, and handwritten notes. She scanned the first few pages, clinical jargon she barely understood, until one phrase froze her. Degenerative neurovascular deterioration, progressive. Her vision blurred. She steadied herself on the cabinet, reading again, hoping she'd misinterpret it. But the words didn't change. Degenerative, progressive, irreversible. Tears welled. She clutched the folder to her chest, her breath coming in shaky gasps. Behind her, a voice said quietly, "You shouldn't be in here, ma'am." She spun around to see an older doctor, gray-haired, eyes kind but firm. "Please," she whispered, "just tell me the truth. How bad is it?" He sighed, glancing at the cameras in the ceiling. "Walk with me." They stepped outside into the cold night air. The doctor's voice was low, His scans show deterioration in parts of the brain controlling motor function and memory. It's rare, and we don't yet know why. Could be genetic, could be viral, could be something we've never seen before. Kate swallowed hard. You're saying he could? She couldn't finish the sentence. He looked away. We're trying to slow it down. But we can't stop it. The world tilted. For a moment, she couldn't feel her legs. The doctor caught her arm gently. We'll do everything possible, ma'am. But you must prepare for what comes. She returned to William's room and sat beside him, watching the faint rise and fall of his chest. You promised me forever, she whispered. And I believed you. The next morning, she confronted the royal liaison assigned to the hospital, a polished man in a navy suit who spoke in rehearsed platitudes. Why wasn't I told? She demanded. Her Majesty instructed full discretion, he replied smoothly. The king believes premature disclosure could cause unnecessary panic. Unnecessary panic? She repeated, voice trembling. My husband might never recover, and you're worried about panic? But he didn't flinch. The monarchy survives on control, ma'am. Emotion clouds judgment. Kate turned away, her jaw tight. Then maybe it's time the monarchy learned how to feel. That evening, she wrote her thoughts in a small leather-bound notebook she'd been keeping since William's collapse. The entries were raw, unfiltered. He's fading, she wrote. I see it in the way his hand no longer squeezes mine back. I see it in his eyes, the flicker of recognition growing shorter each day. If love could heal, he'd be cured 100 times over. She hid the diary in her purse. It would become her private record of truth in a palace built on silence. Meanwhile, outside Northfield House, the world continued to spin in ignorance. News channels recycled the same sterile statement. Royal watchers debated on talk shows whether William was simply exhausted. Only a few investigative journalists began digging deeper, tracing unusual helicopter flights at night, odd financial transfers linked to Northfield Holdings, and restricted airspace permits filed under national security. They were getting close. Inside the palace, panic spread among senior aides. A communications memo leaked suggesting the need for a controlled narrative adjustment. In other words, a half-truth. They drafted a new statement implying William had taken private time to focus on family and recovery. But when Kate saw the draft, she tore it in half. No, she said flatly. Not anymore. The aide looked stunned. Ma'am, you can't defy communications protocol. Kate's eyes were cold. Watch me. She was done being the silent, smiling duchess. Still, she knew she couldn't go public. Not yet. Not without proof. And proof, she realized, was buried somewhere inside this facility. The following week, she returned to the records room, this time during shift change. She copied key documents by hand. Test reports, physician notes, even an entry labeled Project Seraph. That one frightened her most. It mentioned experimental neural therapy and authorization granted by royal directive. Who had authorized this? The king? Without her knowledge? That night, she confronted the senior doctor again. What is Project Seraph? He hesitated. A research program, ma'am. We're exploring an advanced treatment using neuroregenerative stimulation. It's still theoretical. Experimental? She pressed. Yes. And you're using it on him? He looked at the floor. It was the only option left. Her stomach turned. So he's a test subject now? Ma'am, please, you must understand. The decision came from the highest level. The king believes it could save his son. Kate stared at him, disbelief mixing with fury. And if it kills him? The doctor didn't answer. For the first time since the collapse, she felt genuine fear, not just for William's life, but for what the institution was willing to risk to preserve its image. The next day, she noticed new restrictions. Security doubled. Her access card deactivated. When she asked why, she was told it was for safety reasons. But she knew better. Someone had realized she'd seen too much. That night, a nurse slipped her a folded note. Be careful. They're watching you. Sleep was impossible after that. She sat by William's bed, tears drying on her cheeks as she whispered, Hold on, love. I'll get you out of here. Outside, wind howled through the trees. The old estate seemed to breathe, a living thing with secrets buried in its walls. Somewhere in the distance, a generator hummed, feeding life into machines that kept William suspended between waking and oblivion. Days later, during one of her supervised visits, she noticed something odd. A faint scar near the base of his skull, fresh, barely healed. She asked the attending physician about it. He hesitated too long before replying. Routine monitoring port. Nothing to worry about. But she saw the tremor in his hand. He was lying. The truth hit her like ice. They were experimenting on him, testing procedures that had never been approved, maybe not even documented. The king's desperation had crossed a line. That night, she wrote one final line in her diary before locking it away. If he dies here, I'll never forgive them. And then, something unexpected happened. A nurse entered the room late at night and whispered, "They're transferring him tomorrow. Different wing. No one knows why. You didn't hear it from me." Kate's heart raced. Another secret transfer, but to where? She tried calling Charles, but her calls went unanswered. The palace line directed her to an assistant who said vaguely, "His Majesty is unavailable." Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. The next morning, when she arrived at Northfield, William's bed was empty. The machine's gone. The room stripped bare. Panic surged through her veins. She rushed to the nurse's station. "Where is he?" she demanded. No one would meet her eyes. Finally, the head nurse said quietly, "He's been moved to a private ward for further treatment. You'll receive instructions shortly." "Where is it?" Kate's voice cracked. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm not authorized to say." She felt the world tilt again, her breath coming in sharp, shallow bursts. "He's my husband," she hissed. "You don't authorize me. I authorize you." But the nurse only looked away. Kate stormed out into the courtyard, shaking. Above her, gray clouds gathered, heavy with rain. She pulled out her phone, but before she could dial, a message flashed on the screen. "Stop digging. For his sake." Her blood ran cold. She looked back at the old estate, the ivy, the hidden cameras, the locked gates, and realized the horrifying truth. This wasn't a hospital. It was a vault. A place built not to heal, but to contain. And somewhere inside, behind another locked door, the future king of England lay trapped between life and secrecy. Kate vowed then, and there she would uncover everything, no matter who tried to stop her. Because the next thing she'd find, a single hidden file buried deep within Northfield's archives, would expose a conspiracy larger than anyone imagined. And once that truth surfaced, the monarchy itself would tremble. It was past midnight when Kate realized she could no longer trust anyone inside the palace. The walls, once symbols of safety and tradition, now felt like they were closing in. Every whisper, every glance, every footstep behind her carried the weight of suspicion. William was gone, transferred, relocated, hidden under the pretense of further treatment. And all she had left were scraps of paper, fragments of conversations, and the sinking feeling that she was being deliberately kept in the dark. So she started writing. At first, it was just a few notes on a folded sheet of stationery. Her thoughts were disordered, snippets of fear, disbelief, love. But soon, those notes grew into full pages. Then chapters. Each one more raw and painful than the last. She hid the diary inside a carved wooden jewelry box that once belonged to Princess Diana, a gift William had given her years earlier with the words, "Keep what matters most in here." She never imagined those words would one day take on a meaning this dark. The first entry was dated the night William was moved from Northfield House. The ink was smudged, her handwriting uneven. "They've taken him. I don't know where. No one will tell me the truth. I've never felt so helpless. The doctors avoid my eyes, and every phone call to the palace ends the same way. His Majesty will brief you soon. I'm his wife. How can I be the last to know?" Every night, she wrote more. She wrote because she couldn't scream. She wrote because it was the only thing that made her feel like she still existed, like she could still hold on to some small piece of sanity. In one entry, she described the sound of the rain outside the palace windows. "It's been raining for days," she wrote. "The gardens look the same, but everything feels dead. The children ask where their father is. I lie. I tell them he's working. I hate myself for saying it." Her words were desperate but deliberate, an unfiltered account of what the world wasn't allowed to see. She wrote about the coded emails from palace officials, about the way Charles's aides had begun avoiding her, and about a phone call she received from an unknown number late one night. The voice on the other end had whispered just one sentence before hanging up. "Stop asking questions if you love your children." That was the night Kate realized the truth wasn't just hidden, it was being buried. She became meticulous about where she kept the diary. Each morning, She'd slip it beneath a loose floorboard under her vanity table, covering it with a layer of folded fabric. She couldn't risk the staff finding it. Some of the housemaids had already been replaced without notice. Temporary reassignments, she was told. But she could feel it. These weren't reassigned staff. They were watchers. In one of her longer entries, she wrote about a visit from Princess Anne and had stopped by the palace under the guise of checking on the children. But when they found a moment alone, her expression turned grave. Catherine, and had said quietly, "You must be careful. They're keeping things from you. From all of us." Kate had frozen. "Do you know where he is?" And hesitated, her jaw tightening. "They told me he's under special supervision. That's all I know." But the tone, they spoke like he's not fully himself anymore. Kate remembered the chill that crawled down her spine at those words. "What do you mean, not himself?" And had shaken her head. "Just keep that diary of yours. Someday, it might be the only truth left." That night, Kate wrote for hours, her pen trembling as she scrawled. "And knows something. I saw it in her eyes. She's afraid too." Her entries began to change. They weren't just emotional confessions anymore. They became records. Evidence. She documented names, dates, statements. She wrote about the doctors she'd met, the coded files labeled Seraph, the unmarked vehicles coming and going from palace grounds after midnight. She wasn't writing as a grieving wife anymore. She was writing as a witness. Then came the day she received the package. It arrived through a private courier, addressed only to the princess. There was no return address. Inside was a single USB drive and a note that read, "You deserve to know the truth. A friend." Her hands trembled as she inserted the drive into her laptop. A folder opened with several encrypted files. Only one was accessible. It was a video clip labeled W27_internal. The footage was grainy, black and white, taken from a security camera inside what looked like a medical room. At first, she didn't understand what she was looking at. A man in a hospital gown sat in a chair, his face turned away from the camera. But then he lifted his head, and her heart stopped. It was William. He looked thinner, paler, lost. Electrodes trailed from his temples. Two men in lab coats spoke to him softly, their words inaudible. William tried to respond, but his speech was slurred, his head trembling slightly. At one point, he looked directly at the camera, directly into her eyes, and whispered something. She couldn't hear the words, but she could read his lips. "Help me." Kate clutched her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She slammed the laptop shut, her chest heaving. The sound of her heartbeat filled the room. Then came the panic. If someone had sent her this, someone else could be watching. She destroyed the drive within minutes, crushing it under her heel and flushing the fragments. But the image burned itself into her mind. That night, her diary entry was brief. Only 5 words. "They're doing something to him." From that point, her entries grew darker, more determined. She began piecing together the timeline of his disappearance, cross-referencing what she'd overheard from doctors and what little information leaked to the press. She noticed patterns, dates that matched meetings between palace advisors and government health officials. Memos referring to treatment authorization by executive discretion. What kind of treatment needed authorization from the king himself? She filled 10 pages with theories, each one more terrifying than the last. She suspected the experimental Seraph procedure had already been performed, that the scar she'd seen behind William's ear wasn't from monitoring equipment, but from something invasive. She wrote, "They're not trying to heal him. They're trying to control what happens if he doesn't." The implications haunted her. Was this about William's health, or about succession? If the heir to the throne could no longer perform his duties, the monarchy would be thrust into constitutional chaos. Was that why they were hiding him? The palace issued another carefully worded update that week. His Royal Highness is continuing his recovery in a private environment surrounded by family. The words private environment twisted like a knife. Kate stopped attending briefings. Every time an aide approached her with pre-written remarks for public release, she pushed the papers away. "You can tell the world whatever you like," she said one morning, her tone ice cold. "But I'll tell them the truth when I'm ready." And she meant it. Her diary became her preparation, a manifesto of everything they didn't want the world to hear. She detailed her suspicions about Project Seraph, her fear that William had been moved to a classified wing of a royal medical facility in Scotland, and her growing distrust of Charles's advisors. But amid all the tension and paranoia, she also wrote about love. She described the memories that still kept her going. Their first date at St. Andrews, their wedding day, the way he used to laugh until he cried when the kids played pranks on him. Sometimes, she wrote, I think about how normal we used to be before all this. Just William and Kate, two people in love. Not titles, not heirs, not a dynasty, just us. Her words painted a heartbreaking portrait of devotion and despair. And yet, beneath the pain, there was strength. In one entry, she wrote, If he doesn't come back, I will burn every lie they built around him. I owe him that much. That line became the turning point. From that day on, her diary wasn't just a private record, it was a plan. She began copying select pages by hand, sealing them in envelopes marked only with dates. She hid these copies in places no one would suspect. Inside children's storybooks, behind framed portraits, even under a loose brick in the palace greenhouse. If anything ever happened to her, she wanted the truth to survive. And then came the final entry that would later shock the world. It was written after a late-night visit to a royal advisor who had once been close to her and William. The man was visibly shaken when she confronted him about William's real location. After a long silence, he whispered, They've moved him north. Somewhere remote. They say it's for his safety, but I've seen the reports. It's worse than you think. When she pressed him for details, he said one word that sent chills through her body. Decline. That night, she wrote her final entry in trembling handwriting. He's slipping away from me. They've hidden him where no one can find him. But I will, even if it's the last thing I ever do. Because if love can't bring him back, truth will. She closed the book, kissed its cover, and locked it in Diana's jewelry box once more. The next morning, she walked out of the palace looking composed, almost serene. But behind her calm smile, she carried a secret, the last surviving record of what was truly happening behind royal walls. And deep down, she knew that diary might one day be the only weapon she had left. Because the next move she was about to make, her decision to confront the royal doctors face to face, would ignite a battle the monarchy had spent centuries trying to avoid. And when she walked into that meeting room, pen and notebook in hand, no one, not even the king, was prepared for what she was about to reveal. There are moments in history when a single room holds the weight of an entire nation's fate. This was one of those moments. It was a cold, dim afternoon inside Clarence's house. The walls seemed to breathe with tension. Behind closed doors, a handful of the most powerful people in Britain gathered around a polished oak table. Thick curtains sealed the light out. Phones were confiscated. Security guards stood outside like statues. At the head of the table sat King Charles III, his expression carved from stone. To his right, Queen Camilla, rigid and watchful. Across from them, three of the royal family's top medical advisors, Dr. Alastair Hume, the neurologist who had overseen William's care from the start, Dr. Miriam Dalton, the senior physician for the royal household, and Dr. Raj Singh, a quiet but brilliant consultant who rarely spoke in meetings unless it was critical. And then, there was Kate. She hadn't been invited. She had demanded to attend. She'd stood at the entrance earlier that day, trembling but defiant, and said to the king, If you discuss my husband's life without me, I will make sure the public hears every word you're hiding. The threat hung heavy in the air, but Charles relented. So now she sat at the table, her diary clasped in her lap like a shield, her eyes red but burning with purpose. The meeting began in silence. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner seemed deafening. Finally, Charles spoke, his voice hoarse. Let's get to the point. I want the truth. No summaries, no hopeful reassurances. The truth. Dr. Hume exchanged a glance with Dr. Dalton before clearing his throat. Your Majesty, the latest results are deeply concerning. The progression has accelerated. Kate's hand tightened around her notebook. Accelerated? She repeated, her tone sharp. Dr. Hume nodded. The neurological degradation we observed earlier has expanded into multiple cortical regions. In plain terms, his condition is spreading faster than anticipated. A chill ran through the room. Even Camilla looked down. Kate leaned forward. And what exactly does that mean? Be clear, Doctor. Hume hesitated. It means the prince's cognitive and motor functions will continue to deteriorate. We're doing what we can to stabilize him, but, he paused, searching for the right word. The odds are not in his favor. Kate's breath caught. Not in his favor. Her voice cracked. You're talking about my husband, the future king, like a statistic. Charles's hand trembled as he reached for his glass of water. How long? He whispered. The doctor looked down. It's impossible to give an exact timeline. But without a breakthrough, I fear we're talking months, not years. The words dropped like a bomb. Kate covered her mouth. The air sucked from her lungs. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. When she finally did, her voice was low and shaking. You said he was responding. You said there was improvement. Dr. Dalton interjected softly. That was before the relapse. Whatever we did helped only briefly. Kate turned to her. Then find something else. You have every resource in the world. You have funding, power, access, and you're telling me you can't save him. Dr. Singh, who had remained silent until now, spoke quietly but firmly. We've been instructed to explore an alternative option, Your Royal Highness. Kate frowned. An alternative? Charles looked up sharply. Raj. But it was too late. Dr. Singh continued. The king authorized a classified treatment plan, something developed in partnership with a government medical initiative. It's not public knowledge. It's called the Seraph Protocol. The name struck Kate like déjà vu. She'd seen it before, on those hidden files at Northfield. Her voice hardened. I know about Seraph. I know it's experimental. I also know it nearly killed him. The doctors exchanged uneasy glances. Dr. Dalton finally said, With respect, ma'am, we have no alternative. This is uncharted ground. Yes, but it's the only intervention that has shown any signs of delaying the progression. Delaying? Kate shot back. Not curing. Silence. Camilla broke it with a sigh. Catherine, this isn't about miracles. It's about preservation. The institution must survive. Kate turned on her. Disbelief etched across her face. Preservation? He's not a relic. Camilla, he's your stepson. He's my husband, the father of your grandchildren. Charles raised his hand weakly. Enough. We will not turn this into a spectacle. His voice wavered, betraying the fear beneath his composure. We're all trying to do what's best for William. Kate's eyes flashed. Then start by telling me the truth. Where is he now? Dr. Hume hesitated, glancing at the king for permission. Charles nodded grimly. He's in Balmoral, the northern wing. We had to move him when the press got too close to Northfield. Kate blinked, stunned. Balmoral? You put him in that freezing castle, away from his children, away from me, and called it care. The environment is controlled, Hume said softly. Seclusion helps reduce external stressors. We're monitoring him around the clock. Kate pushed back her chair, so suddenly it scraped the floor. You're not monitoring him. You're hiding him. The king's jaw tightened. Catherine, sit down. But she didn't. She stood tall, her voice trembling with rage. I've seen the footage. I know what they're doing to him. You're experimenting on him like a lab rat. Dr. Singh's eyes widened. You saw? Kate slammed her diary onto the table. Don't bother lying. I have everything written down. Every name. Every date. Every conversation. If anything happens to him, the world will know exactly what you've done. For a moment, no one moved. The silence was electric. Then Charles spoke, softly, almost pleadingly. Catherine, please. You must understand. The monarchy has faced crisis before, but never like this. If word of William's condition reaches the public, it could destabilize the nation. Parliament would panic. The media would devour him. We're buying time. Time for science. Time for hope. Kate stared at him, her eyes glistening. You're not buying time. You're buying silence. She turned to the doctors again. Tell me, did he consent to this treatment? Dr. Dalton looked pained. He was semi-conscious at the time. His verbal consent was. So no. Kate interrupted. He didn't consent. And yet you went ahead. Dr. Hume rubbed his forehead, exhausted. Ma'am, we believed it was the only way to save him. Save him? Kate whispered. You're killing him slowly. The king's composure finally cracked. He slammed his fist on the table. Enough. You think I don't care? He's my son. His voice broke, and for a fleeting second, the mask of monarchy fell away. The father stood where the king had been. Every night, I wake wondering if I made the right choice. But I cannot, will not, watch this family crumble because we hesitated. Kate softened, her fury folding into sorrow. Then don't watch it crumble, Charles. Fix it. Stop hiding. Let people see the truth. Let them see the human side of this family again. Camilla scoffed quietly, earning a sharp glare from Kate. Do you honestly think the public wants to see their future king frail and fading? You'd turn compassion into chaos. Kate shot back, better chaos than deceit. For a moment, no one spoke. Only the rain tapping against the window broke the silence. Finally, Dr. Singh cleared his throat. There's something else. All eyes turned to him. We received new data from the most recent scan, he continued carefully. It suggests the degeneration may not be entirely organic. There are traces of chemical markers, substances that don't belong. Kate frowned. What are you saying? Dr. Singh hesitated. I'm saying this may not have been natural. Someone could have induced or accelerated it. The room froze. Charles looked horrified. You mean poison? It's possible, Dr. Singh said quietly. We can't confirm yet. But traces of neurotoxic compounds have been found. Compounds consistent with long-term exposure. Kate's pulse raced. Exposure from what? Food? Medicine? Air? We're still analyzing. He lowered his voice. But the pattern suggests deliberate introduction. The king's face went pale. Camilla's teacup rattled in her hand. Kate leaned forward, voice barely a whisper. Are you saying someone did this to him? No one answered. Charles's gaze hardened. This doesn't leave this room. Understood. Kate rose slowly, disbelief flooding her. No, Your Majesty. This time it does.